We're not trying to create a lack of agency. We're not trying to create slaves who are simply not responsible for anything. And we've got to we've got to bring them to life. We've got to start to make them feel like human beings that are cared for, that can build relationships within the family, within the community, that can do a job that actually makes a difference, where they make choices.
And everything else has gone. Now, this is how bleak some of our country has become. And so that layer of intermediary institutions within the way of thinking that Catholic social thought has iterated over the years is absolutely vital for human society to flourish.
He founded what is today Unilever, that massive company which is in all sorts of chemicals and soap, and obviously his big thing was soap, Sunlight soap, and he decided that when he built his new factory he would build it in a place called Port Sunlight, and it had accommodation for all of the workers, and it was a model that was hugely successful.
The Manna Journey is the catalyst for change in our world. It's a consistent source of truth for the next generation and current leaders. Our mission is to change the world by reframing our current governance, by using ancient wisdom to solve modern problems, and by shaping innovative new businesses to have a culture of pursuit of purpose.
Are we living in a modern slave economy where nobody is given human dignity, where the poorest are pushed to the very lowest level of indignity and indeed lack of empowerment? Well, Philip Ullman thinks so, and this is part of the Manna Journey, a project to bring the Bible into everyday life, society and economics. And we're joined today by Jenny Sinclair, the founder and director of Together for a Common Good, which is a Christian charity looking at building a better society. So we've heard about all of the problems, we've heard about the way that they exist in Egypt and the way that they exist in a similar way today, but what is the solution to any of this? Is there a solution?
Yes, there is a solution, the good news. The Bible is crystal clear. And metaphorically, I think we have to start thinking about society as a living ecosystem of people who are alive, the planet is alive, and things are flowing around the ecosystem, and there is no slavery. We're not enslaving other people. That's the model. So how does it work in practice? That's the Manna Journey. The first thing that happens is there's abundance, the bread comes down from heaven, but then you have to then create a society which looks at people's needs every single day, locally. So you start to recreate Grimsby, Liverpool, start bringing these places back to life. We start to get money flowing around so everybody is paid every day. Unlike the system that we currently have, you pay them every day and they pay services every day. But they are thinking about meeting everybody's needs every single day. So if you have more money in your bank account than you need, you go out into the streets and you say, this street, this school needs to be rebuilt. This hospital isn't working properly. The streets need to be repaired. So you start to locally take responsibility for your local community, and you start to look at people who are unemployed and jobs that need to be done. At the moment, we all know there's a disconnect.
So, Philip, rather than hoarding money in your bank account, what you're saying is the investment that you want is to build a better community, because by building a better community, you will be looked after in your old age more effectively, your children will go to a better school, and everybody will benefit, including you.
Absolutely. So what we're saying is I have an obligation, as Jenny says, not right, obligations to meet everybody's needs, starting with my family, starting with the community, in concentric circles, but working locally, rebuilding the rootedness that we need, so we can start envisaging towns which are vibrant, which are thriving, where people are actually working together to solve problems. People are making choices. People are money's flowing around every day. The money is mine, unlike the completely crazy banking system we have now, where in fact it's not you that has money. It's actually doesn't work at all effectively. It's a kind of credit in a banking system. So we have to re-understand money is mine, but I'm a trustee. I have to use it for the sake of others and the sake of the planet. So you start to envisage a flow combined with let go, which means that you mustn't enslave. Therefore, and when you lend money, you have to build in the concept of no interest, because interest effectively means you're going to take the money out of the flow, because you can leave it in the bank account, it starts to accumulate interest, which means it doesn't flow. You then say, if I've got people can't afford to pay it, I take away their house. Well, that makes a lot of sense, because as we said before, they have nowhere to live, they're out in the streets, their families decimated, the community is decimated, the rootedness is decimated, and the creditor doesn't need the house. That makes a lot of sense.
And of course, the problem is with that, if you don't have a relationship with somebody, if you're not working within the community, if the contract is just a piece of paper, then that's why the house gets taken away as a punishment and a threat to others. But you don't need that under the system that you're talking about.
Absolutely. And then let's assume somebody is unwell or unemployed. You have to help them out of that predicament by lending money, but the lending is on three conditions: 1, no interest; 2, no security in repossession; 3, debt forgiveness, which means you're working with people to build a relationship with them. They're coming back to you every single night, and you're working with them, saying, 1 minute, what are your skills? What jobs need to be done? And we're not effectively waiting for years before we solve problems, solve them on a daily basis.
So suddenly somebody gets made redundant, and they come and they go, Philip, I need a little bit of help. And you go, well, I'm happy to give you some money, but you can speak French, can't you? And my little granddaughter wants to go to France. Would you be willing, instead of just taking a handout, to take the money to teach my granddaughter French?
Absolutely right. So we're not trying to create dependence. We're not trying to create a lack of agency. We're not trying to create slaves who are simply making a decision, not responsible for anything, and we've got to bring them to life. We've got to start to make them feel like human beings that are cared for, that can build relationships within the family, within the community, that can do a job that actually makes a difference, where they make choices.
So this is a very different vision, isn't it, from the current vision that we're operating in, which is a low economy with high welfare.
Yes.
Which I think, speaking from the churches, from the Christian point of view, a lot of the churches fall into a trap here, where they think we've got to help people who are poor, and it turns the churches into sort of benevolent society of giving out, but rather than building relationships with, rather than living alongside and doing a hand up, it becomes a hand out. And almost as if the church has become an extension of the state.
Yes.
So this whole kind of welfarist mentality is very different from what you're describing. And I share your vision. It's the same vision, actually, as within Catholic social thought, which is a mutual obligation of fundamentally recognizing that my neighbor and I need each other. The Jeremiah 29:7, seek the welfare of the city, for in its welfare you will find your welfare. There is a sense of self-interest, actually, in this mutual obligation that we find. But what I'm interested in is, how do we get from where we are to there, Philip? Because when you're talking about when people come to you and you can be more constructive and more helpful, you're speaking from the position of a wealthy businessman, right? But what if you were in a town like Liverpool or Grimsby or Blackpool, where there are very few wealthy people, if any at all, and there are no jobs? How do you persuade an investor that that's where he or she should place their trust and their money?
Well, the starting point here is, again, understanding really is what the whole concept of money is. So you pick an example that Grimsby, there may not be a businessman that is prepared to invest. First of all, let me tell you, and Gary Klopfenstein, who's a partner of mine, who is a Christian, has proven this time and time again. If you look after people, look after relationships, look after the planet, guess what? You actually do generate more money. So it's not about creating losses. It's got to be sustainable. And he's proven it time and time again. It works, because if you have healthy relationships, you don't need to do it as a loss. But that said, Gary's he's a custodian. We are custodians. So because you're doing a good job, people love you.
You're talking about a shift in mindset.
Yes.
For within the business community. This is what we're after, really, is to say, just wake up for a moment. You've got stuck in a different operating system. I mean, I find this really interesting, particularly with some Christian business people or philanthropists who don't quite get this, and so they make a lot of money in whatever sector they're working in, and then they give it away as philanthropy. But they're not doing what you're describing, which is actually closer to some of the Quaker business models, for example, of Cadbury and Rowntree back in the day. They built villages, they had theatres and leisure places, and not just jobs. They cared for the welfare of their people.
I'm surprised as somebody who lives in Liverpool, you didn't come up with the obvious example of Port Sunlight.
Lord Lever.
Yes, absolutely. William Lever.
Perhaps you could tell the story, because I'm not familiar.
It's very simple. He founded what is today Unilever, that massive company which is in all sorts of chemicals and soap, and obviously his big thing was soap, Sunlight soap. And he decided that when he built his new factory, he would build it in a place called Port Sunlight, and it had accommodation for all of the workers. Now, what was interesting about William Lever was that he lived in Port Sunlight. He did have the biggest house, and it was directly opposite the entrance to the factory, but it wasn't astonishingly disproportionate to the other properties there, and it was a model that was hugely successful. Of course, it took Lever Brothers to what is now Unilever today.
Can I just answer your question, Jenny? What happens if the business people are not prepared to move to the local city? The beauty of credit or relationship building is you can actually give credit as you can give the power in theory to the local parish, to the local, and they could start literally creating a ledger which they could actually use the money to actually lend people who got and to meet their needs. It doesn't need to start with an investor. It can actually start. It's not altogether. It's not different. I'm not an expert on credit unions, but the concept, yes, but what you want to do is very clear: is distribute responsibility. You want the bright, creative entrepreneurs who know how to solve problems, which is what our skills are.
But
you have to.
But Jenny, Jenny, let me just say this to you, because I think what you're driving at is credit unions, an example, but also there's old guilds of freemen, there are civic trusts. There are even down to little sports clubs where a lot of these are actually, these things are happening.
So this is exactly where we need to go. Within Catholic social teaching, there's a concept called intermediary institutions, which are exactly the bodies you've been describing. Sports clubs, local charities, churches, mosques, synagogues, small businesses, family businesses, and so on. A whole range, a diversity of really interesting organizations or institutions that have been created by the local people, right? And have some sort of endurance, that they're not fly-by-night, they're not like short-term projects. These are things that have lasted. And they're also institutions within which human beings can find their purpose. So you may volunteer at one, or you may have a job at one, or you may be a member of one, and through that you meet other people, and that humanizes your life. Whereas if you look at a place with this kind of civic degradation, as I was talking about before, you might end up with just a chicken shop, a pawn shop, and a betting shop, and that's it, and everything else has gone. Now, this is how bleak some of our country has become, and so that layer of intermediary institutions within the way of thinking that Catholic social thought has iterated over the years is absolutely vital for human society to flourish.
Can I just explain to you, just to build on what Jenny has said, the trouble we've got is this credit. We need credit. There's always a need for credit. Back to the Bible, because if you've got an agrarian economy, you've only got 6 months of production. You need 6 months where there's no production. You always will need, and this concept, by the way, that it was barter, isn't true. There was never barter. It was actually credit. You trusted, you worked in a local village, you trusted each other, and you therefore gave your neighbouring farmer wool, because you knew that when you needed milk, he would just get, you didn't have to record it. So it was about building relationships. So effectively what we've done is libertarian, focus on the I, And therefore, we allow banks, crazy as it sounds, to literally create credit and then use it to pump up the prices of real estate, which actually means that young people can't get them. They pumped up the prices of stocks and shares, which means that people can't get the security of an investment. And it also pumps up consumer prices. So the concept of credit is solid, but it's biblical credit, which is focused on relationships, on building businesses which actually provide what the community needs